Welcome to Music Ed Tech Talk, a podcast exploring the topics of music, education, technology, and the intersections between them, with a special focus on the productive and creative process. I'm your host, Robby Burns. Close enough. All right. We should probably the neural mix thing. I don't know. Do you feel like what you just described? It seems like the perfect. I don't know if the typical music teacher would pay $50 for the use case you just described, but it is the perfect selling point of an app. So neural mix, being the Mac app that we were just talking about right before we hit record, can separate audio, like vocals, accompaniment, and drums from a audio file independently. And then you wouldn't use it professionally, but you said like just to get a vocal separated real quick and dirty.
I mean, I could imagine using it if I wanted to make a quick like song parody and get a background from something. That would be handy. I mean, it is overpriced, I guess. I mean, I think that some people might think it's worth it though, just to have the ability to create their own resources with an app that's very focused. It might be worth it. I mean, it's obviously the company thinks it's worth that much. I think it, would I point a music teacher to that instead of like getting Ableton Live and then like paying for that and then realizing it doesn't have that functionality built in? I mean, I think to some people it might be totally worth it.
How would you accomplish that task of stripping the vocals? What would you use?
Well, I mean, that's the tricky thing is like I think the way Neural Mix Pro is doing it is it's doing some kind of spectral analysis. It's doing like an FFT like analysis of the track, and then it's like finding different parts of the spectrum to get rid of. And it's doing it maybe with some real-time analysis neural engine stuff or whatever. I don't know exactly what it's doing there, but it's doing it a little faster than you'd normally be able to do it, which is really cool. If I were needing to do that same exact task in Ableton Live, I would probably need some kind of third-party plugin to do it with like just like a regular, like let's say I ripped something compressed off of YouTube. I would probably need to like use some kind of third-party tool that did the same kind of thing where you can select a part of the spectrum and say remove noise. If I had high-quality audio, let's say I had a CD rip of, and not an MP3, but like an actual like wave PCM audio file of like vocals, like the track that has vocals and an instrumental of the track, I could sum them together using Ableton Live in mono and flip the phase of one of them, and it would cancel all of that stuff out that matched, and then only the stuff that remains would be like what was different between the two tracks. And again, that's like the ideal scenario when you see like DIY acapellas on YouTube that sound really good, but you can still hear a little background noise. That's usually how they were made, is with like actual PCM audio. When you hear the ones that sound like they're underwater, and that's kind of what the results from Neural Mix Pro sound like. They're underwater sometimes too. That's coming from a compressed audio file. So you get some of that imperfection from the MP3 or the whatever the compression algorithm was.
Here's what it's going to be good for, though, and this is why I bought it, and why for someone like me who's just gonna go like be a little nerdy and go a little extra, but doesn't like I'm never gonna need to do what you just described. But what I am gonna need to do is when my general music class starts up in late January, we started using Soundtrap last spring, and I can already tell you like being able to just strip the rap track off of tons of like anything I want and have it not, it's going to, it'll sound a little bit like it's underwater, but just being able to then export that at an, more exacting tempo, like taking something that's like 79.4 beats per minute, exporting it vocals only to 80 beats per minute, and then dragging that, giving that to a kid and saying like, hey, remix this. Like that's going to be hugely motivating and now easy for me.
Totally. I totally agree with that. That's a great use case. And, like I said, like just for creating your own resources like that, having something that's fast might be worth it, even if it's not the most professional tool or the professional sound. Sometimes speed is the best resource you have in that case. So,
I mean, we did this, I counted because I just had another guest on who was a guest like around the same time you were. It was like 4 years ago, I think, almost 4 years ago that we last did that, which seems a little crazy, but yeah, you
didn't we talk about iCloud Drive or something like that?
So
like when it first came out.
Yeah, actually. So every episode that whole year was about a chapter of my book, and the book was about organizing yourself in the music classroom. So it's like I had a whole chapter on audio, and I was like, well, let me get someone who actually like deals with this problem more aggressively than I do to come teach me how to deal with audio. I'll have Will on. So you come on, and then you dispelled all of my crazy theories about how because we not to get totally back into it again, but it's like I feel like we have it's pretty obvious that the managing photos that you take on your phone's camera, like that's kind of a solved problem. I don't demand much more from my photo app on my phone, but like musicians end up with tons of audio scraps and drafts and things, and the app that is best for like having giant play forward, backwards, skip, pause buttons is a music app. But there's no real music apps generally tend to celebrate polished commercial music that's got an album pretty like tracks that go from start to end that are correctly labeled with the right metadata, beautiful artwork, like all this stuff. So it's the question I was trying to figure out is like, how do you take all the musical work and organize it in a meaningful way? And that's a very, very specific topic now that I think about it. And then you told me, don't do any of that, just put it all in the file system until it's actually beautiful, and then put it in your music program.
I mean, yeah, I guess I would I would just say I would probably say that same exact thing now, is just like comparing it to editing photos. Editing music is very different, I think. Because when you take a photo, it's way closer to being done in most cases than music is. So, unless you took a one microphone live recording of something where, okay, that's more like taking a photograph, but like putting a song together, it's more like making a movie, like a motion picture. And there's just a lot of moving parts to it. That's not the average person,
Do you feel like the people who take photos that end up in National Geographic would agree with your statement about photos? Like, do they just have millions of photos that they hate on their camera roll? Or do you think they're more discerning? Like they don't do anything that doesn't go through like a Lightroom or a middle program first?
I think that professionals are always going to run their stuff through some kind of program. But I mean, there's a phrase in the photography land, which, I've dabbled in a little bit, called it's like they'll put hashtag SOOC, and it means straight out of the camera. And it just, I mean, I think that anybody who's taken pictures with a halfway decent camera knows that feeling of oh yeah, I dialed it in just right, boom, that was the moment. That photo is 90% of the way there already. That's just great. And you're going to probably, sweeten it up in Lightroom, but you're not necessarily going to comp it together with 12 other photos either. That's just the kind of, it's just a different comparison, I think.
It's hard. Yeah, it's weird because the same thing is video, I know you're teaching kids how to produce video also. I mean, video is another one of these things where I don't know where I want to store the videos on my computer. Like if I do a concert performance.
Okay. Here's a place I've evolved a little bit since that conversation. So now when I have a big video project, 'cause I feel like video has increased in size a lot since we had that conversation.
Yep.
So let's say when I make the biggest personal projects I make are vacation videos, and we take all the camera gear with us on vacations, and we're just shooting like crazy. And This is like an iJustine trick where you just like for every big project that you're making, you just get one of those like Samsung T5 or similar kind of SSDs and just like Velcro it to the back of your laptop. That has the Final Cut library and all of the raw footage. Everything gets imported straight to that. You make your video, you export your video, and then when you're done and you've made that video, that thing gets unplugged and you throw it in the fireproof box after you're done. Nothing gets lost, but you're not like dealing with cleaning off your computer afterwards either, you know?
That's very wise. Do you actually use duct tape? Because
I don't use duct tape.
This is the kind of
I've used those little Velcro dots though.
Oh yeah,
You can just
Velcro
like
dots.
Velcro it to
That's
the back.
smart. So you don't wipe it for the next project. You actually just keep the raw footage on it.
They're not that much. I mean, they're like what, like $50 to $70 depending on the sale you get.
That's good.
And it's like I don't want to lose all of the shots of like some amazing place I went. Also, I don't want to make some super long video that's not fun to watch either. So like I have to keep that stuff. I'm not going to throw any shots away from that whole vacation, but like I just want it to exist somewhere. So like, yeah, it's like once that project is done, and that's what I that's a trick from professionals too, because like they'll go and like do a documentary shoot or something, and they have to like archive stuff for their clients because the clients might come back a year later and say, hey, can you change this statistic because this shot needs change? They need to go back in the project. So it's like you import everything so it lives in this like you make a Final Cut library for that project and it lives on the SSD, and then once that's done, it's done. And you just yeah, that's how I started doing that.
There's another layer to the question though, which is like where, like I know where if I take a video of my son doing something cute, that goes in the camera roll. But like where does that finished video live for you? Do you put it in the Photos app and then sync it over iCloud, or do you just leave it on your computer's file system?
Oh yeah,
like where?
I mean, it usually lives a few places. Like I'll upload it to YouTube. It'll be on my desktop probably for a while, so I can just like look at it. I put it in my camera roll. I mean, everybody in the family gets a copy of the finished video. Obviously, all the photos you took on your phone during the trip are also on your camera roll too. So like, you've got kind of a handy reference, and you know the stuff that got filmed with the professional camera, you're going to find that in the nice compilation video. And if you really need to dig up a shot from it, it's in the fireproof box.
That's what I'm finding too. Is sort of the combination of file system, photos, and also YouTube for the exact same reason you just said. The thing that the place I find myself searching stuff though is if I did put it on YouTube, is YouTube, just because it's like it's there.
YouTube, it's easy to pull up to like to show other people.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was good. This was a good update on the 4 years ago appearance. I mean, anyone who wants to learn more. I mean, there's sort of like a little bit of introductory information about like who you are and what you do, but do you want to like restate like where you teach, what you teach?
Yeah, I teach music technology at Lebanon High School it's near Cincinnati, Ohio. I also teach music technology at the University of Cincinnati, CCM, and I am an Ableton certified trainer. So got a lot of different ways of doing and saying the same thing there, where I'm teaching people how to make music and using technology.
To me, you were one of the first people who publicly I knew to replace all of the MIDI keyboards in their high school tech lab with the Ableton push at every station. Is that's probably pretty accurate. I was an early mover on that, and I mean, if I could have moved earlier, I would have. I feel like it was kind of interesting. When I very first started, I was like installing piano labs for Korg in the summer, and I was kind of seeing where like the old way was like merging into the new way, where like you'd have these piano training classes essentially that, you know, you need a full-size piano and you're going to be talking a lot about how to physically play the piano. And you saw some of that equipment being repurposed into
more creative music classes where the focus is less about the physics of playing the piano and more about creating new music. And, I just kind of like hit the gas on that idea where I just said, if the goal is creating new music, let's just get rid of all these traditions that are holding us back. So, if I'm not here to really train people how to play piano, and there's a tool that lets me do the piano things faster, like chord progressions and melodies and bass lines and like all these little like things, elements of writing a song that I might need them to have. Once the push came along, I was like, that's the tool we need. And we were very fortunate to be, I think we were the first school in North America to be the Push Initiative lab. We had those about a year ahead of the public launch of that, and we're able to contribute to like how they rolled that out. So I think when you say it now in 2020, it feels like a way less controversial decision than it felt when that must have been 2014, 2015 when we were first talking about doing that. And it just seems, in hindsight, it seems like an obvious thing. And at the time, it was not an obvious thing, especially in a public school steeped in, the traditions of music ed.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. And this maybe even ties into just like some of the more current events. Like my school district, I can sense from that the perspective of our leadership is opening to the idea that that there are other ways to begin a path in music, and that those ways might be accessible to students who are otherwise not involving themselves musically. And my band program is probably I don't know. You could probably argue that it's as traditional as can be. I mean, like we're teaching winds, brass, and percussion more or less in a way that if you saw someone teach winds, brass, and percussion 30 years ago, it would look like you wouldn't be shocked that it's the same career,
And there's nothing wrong with that either. It's like I think that like when people hear me talk or they hear you talk about like the newer things you're doing, they feel like it's like a threat to that. And I mean, if there's one big thing, is like that's not a threat to that. It's like that's a totally different skill training. I think it's funny that what you just said about your leadership starting to open up to the idea that there are other ways of learning music. And it's like, well, I think anybody knows there's more than just band and orchestra and choir ways of learning music. I mean, anybody who's like picked up a guitar and taught themselves, which is like a lot of people, knows that you can skip a lot of that and learn your own things. But it is funny that like once you put the institution in it, it becomes like mired in like, oh, is it okay to do this, pedagogically? And I think that's where like the gap is right now, is like there's plenty of practice happening right now that are programs like mine to look at and to use as case studies and examples. And I think there's a nice body of research suggesting that we try new things. I think what's missing is something that the average music ed professor can pick up off the shelf and say, okay, here's a method for doing this, and it's like how we can point to Orff or Kodai or something and say, here's what this guy says you should do. And we're kind of missing that for music tech, partially because everybody has like a different way of doing it, which is not like a bad thing in my opinion. It's just we're missing the last few steps of like becoming like a tent pole for like the average K-12 school.
Well, I think that the situation with online teaching has actually, and that was what I was trying to speak to, is that I think it sped things up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like when you say, well, you got to make music with computers now, all of a sudden people get a little desperate. And I think it's not certainly like the purest motivation to legitimize electronic music, but it certainly is something to be said. There's something to be said for, hey, well, this is the tool that we have. Well, how are people making music that's meaningful with this tool? Maybe we should rethink the way we've been doing it when we cannot do it meaningfully that way. And that's not to discredit the traditional performing arts, I mean, I am making the band classroom as meaningful as I think that I can, given the resources and the, the context at which everything is kind of going down right now. But it's also encouraging to hear that, that people are saying, hey, like, all right, in our music classes, like, what about songwriting? What about electronic music? And, in our general music class, the one that I teach, the curriculum has piano and guitar, technical skill and note reading and stuff in it. So that was the part that to me with the Ableton push was a little interesting. Is like, for me, with piano being a part of the curriculum, I see, and also being someone who, reads a keyboard pretty well and also plays keyboard fairly well. To me, that's not an instrument I would ever want to be detached from when I'm making or producing music electronically. But, and it just sort of makes sense that for these kids, if you're going to teach them how to read and play a little bit of basic piano, that's sort of like a natural tool to transition them to. Well, and it's also the only tool that we have in our school. Like, we don't have the push, but
yeah, I think I think one thing that I would add to that is that teaching online has forced us to think less about the large group and more about the individual experience. And because I think many of us found out in the spring that like trying to do a large group over Zoom is kind of unsatisfying, and the results are kind of unsatisfying. And it is possible, and maybe just because it's possible doesn't mean it's like the best way to go about music learning. Like, I have a friend who's still teaching band online and essentially doing it as like group private lessons, and he feels like he's getting farther with his students than ever before. And I think that there's just like traditions that we just don't question in American music ed. And that's one of them, is that this all should lead to a large group experience. And I don't think that it necessarily has to. I think a lot of other countries have also determined that it doesn't have to. And if it's individual, then you can do lots of different things. You can do more than just band and choir and orchestra. You can do music tech, and you can do, other alternative things that maybe no one's thought of yet, a lot easier.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, our performing arts music team is, fortunately, we're all philosophically aligned on the idea that things are individual based to begin with. Like, to us, the band room is, it's scheduled so that they see us for 45 minutes a day in a big group. So it obviously is a part of the curriculum that is well considered. But the real development of musicianship is happening in these once a week sectional pull-out groups. For me, the band concert is like just icing on the cake. Like, that's just the way that we execute the skills we've developed. And, for a lot of kids, it's this social thing that they look forward to, and they love the sound of being in a band. But yeah, no, I totally agree. Looking to the individual is definitely a thing that I think is changing. So I don't know. It'll be interesting though. I did not think that we would see like a ton of reform throughout this process, but I'm already, even just at the beginning of this fall, I'm seeing attitudes change about a whole lot of things, musically, technologically, shifts I was not expecting to happen that early in the pandemic. So,
well, pandemics are a time for change. We even wrote a chapter about that in the book. So, I mean,
let's just talk. We should talk about that now. Why not?
Yeah, sure.
Just talk about the book. So Ethan was on last fall. I got to have him on again soon. Ethan Hein, that is, episode 2 of this current season, for anyone who wants to go back and listen. And that was a great conversation. We talked a lot about the racial politics of music education and, the whole bunch of other things that if anyone who's read Ethan's blog is familiar with. But you all are about, when is this book coming out? You both have a book coming out together called Electronic Music Schools. That's the working title?
That is the title, Electronic Music School. And subtitle... Oh, hang on. Wait, let me pull up. We got a sketch of the cover today. It was pretty exciting.
Oh, that's exciting. I remember Ethan tweeting about the enthusiasm he had about like looking at artwork and shopping around for that.
It's been really cool to like see. It's a subtitle, A Contemporary Approach to Teaching Musical Creativity. And this has been like a blast collaborating with Ethan. He is so smart and so well spoken, and his writing is just like, he's just superhumanly good at writing, I think. and there were chapters of mine that he copy edited where, I mean, I don't even know how he was able to turn what I wrote into a coherent thought in some of these chapters, and it all comes across exactly how I wanted it to. This book represents a kind of a meld of where he's coming from and where I'm coming from. How we got together and started writing it. So I was proposing a book to try to encapsulate the program that I'd created at the high school I teach at. And I felt like a lot of the work was done building that program, and it needed to be documented. And so I was making book proposals, and I kept getting back that I was light on research. And I know that I'm light on research. I'm not a PhD candidate. I'm not doing a lot of research. I'm doing a lot of practice. And so at the same time, you know, Ethan and I had been friends for a couple of years, and he posted that he was thinking about writing a book with some lesson plans in it, with some of it, with, you know, backed by his philosophy research that he was doing for his dissertation. And you know, he posted a slide deck of it, and I was, you know, and I flipped through it, and I was like, this is like the philosophy spot on, and it just looked like he needed more ideas for lesson plans. And I was like, Ethan, I've got this book that I've been proposing that they say it's light on research, but I've got like a million projects that are all like fully time tested. You've got all the research that I need, and I feel like you're coming at this from the exact right place. Do you want to just like be on this book with me, and like let's do this and really like knock this idea out of the park? And I feel like that's what we were able to do. Like, I'm actually like really proud of this book. I'm proud of the other book too, Interactive Composition. I had a blast writing that with VJ. That book is like a technical kind of book that will take you through very specific technical problems. This book, we envision this being like the blueprint that you can follow to create music tech programs in high schools. And it takes you through the philosophy, it takes you through the practical and political types of things you're going to encounter when planning it, what equipment you're going to need to look at, how to plan out a lab space. And then it takes you through, I think, 15-ish projects. We have like a lot of projects in this book that take you through a bunch of different techniques. And you know, it's basically a semester worth of material that you can like teach a class off of if you want. It also teaches you how to design your own projects and how to curate like a student community to like build beyond just the class that you lead, to have student-led programs and things like that. So we tried to like get it all in this one book to be like the blueprint for it. So I'm really happy with how it turned out. I hope that other people are excited about it when they see it too. And we don't know when it's coming out exactly yet. It's probably going to be, I'm going to say early 2021, but I don't know how early.
That's good. I'm looking forward to it. Well, and what's exciting is that, you know, as long as I'm teaching a general music class, like the part of it that is lesson plans is like, I can see myself just kind of digging right into that. Because with interactive composition, which I think is by the way, side note, great book, and also very good artwork. I think about every time I hold that book, I think about how much I like the cover. Which I
think you're gonna like this cover too. I'm just as excited about this cover. Let me pull it up on the screen so you can see it. Thank you, by the way. Honestly, that's my favorite part of writing a book is the cover. It's got a pop, man. It's got a
pop. Mm-hmm.
And here, let me show you. So that's the working cover right now.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
So to all of you listening, it looks really good. It's a very nice looking cover.
It's a very nice looking cover. Is that like, that's not public yet, is it? Because I was going to say, I know how to make I do chapters in this podcast where you can skip around, and I know how to make the album artwork change images based on which chapter. But if that is not for public use
not
yet,
public, and it's not final. There might be a couple changes to this design, but this is pretty, I was pretty pleased. This is really close to the mock-up that we sent in, with a couple things to make it a little more readable, but yeah, this is exciting to see, kind of the production version of that. And it'll look very similar to that when it's out.
It looks good. It looks really good. Yeah, but I can see myself just ripping into these lessons, because that was the thing with interactive composition. I was inspired by and enjoyed every page of it, but I don't use Ableton in the
and we tried to make it that way in this book too, so that it's like some of the lessons do get into the weeds about like things that you would do in Ableton, but they don't necessarily go as in detail technically as interactive composition did. It's more outlines like the procedure you would take with students and what kinds of elements you'd be having them make for the project. And when necessary for the description, we'll talk about how you'd make it with live or how you'd make it with the push, but you could easily adapt that to whatever you're using. And we tried to, it's like we knew that we're going to, all the screenshots are Ableton Live, and all of the, when it does get technical, it talks about things that Ableton Live and Push can do. But we wanted to make it so the projects, the bones of the project could be adapted, and you can kind of pick and choose what you like from it, and design your own projects ultimately is the goal. Like, we don't necessarily want everybody doing the exact same projects that are in this book, but they are worth a try, and they might be a good starting point for you making your own really great projects that suit your population really well.
Yeah, totally. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I when I've got third pages, I'll have to send you a copy. You can get an advanced look at it.
I'm happy to dig into anything. Yeah, really cool. Well, do we want to? We could just, we could talk about all of this forever, but there also has been some Apple stuff. Are you feeling good about pivoting there?
Yeah, let's pivot.
So
I think we got to talk about those garage doors at the beginning. I have never seen that open before. I knew that it existed because I remember reading about it when they were building that big office building. The 4-story tall garage doors. That's insane. That's crazy stuff. Did you see that?
I'm trying to remember. So I was teaching a class. I rewatched the event. Are you talking about today's event?
Yeah, today's event, right at the beginning of the video. Okay. There's this drone shot, flies into Apple campus, and it's like the cafeteria doors open, and they are like the biggest doors you've ever seen. And, Tim Cook is right behind them, and, it flies in over this cafeteria or whatever's in there.
I got to rewatch it.
Yeah, it's pretty sick, dude. Just the way they've shown off that building in these videos they've been doing this year instead of the keynotes, like that's killer, man. That is top-notch Hollywood stuff there. So did you pre-order a MacBook Air yet?
All right. If you're listening and you have no idea what we're talking about, Apple had an event today. They announced the Macs. They also, I have not on this program talked about, I've talked like a little bit in passing about some things related to the other two events, but Apple has had 3 events this year to announce products. Usually we get like 1 or maybe 2. Everything from Apple Watches to new services to iPhones to new HomePod, and today Macs with silicon processors that are made in-house.
No, this is I think it's really interesting because like we've been talking about this. I feel like we've talked about it before, that like as soon as they were making their own chips for the iPads, you can see it coming over the horizon, that if this is successful, they're going to try to do this everywhere. And then they did it with the watch, and then they did it with the T2, and it just keeps creeping and creeping and creeping closer and closer to the Mac. And you just wonder, like, what's the point where they decide to dump Intel and they decide these are good enough to replace it? And I feel like the writing's been on the wall for a while. Like, for the last, 3 or 4 years, if you got the biggest new iPhone and benchmarked it against the MacBook Pros of that year, it was comparing favorably for the last few years, which is that doesn't like match your experience when you're using it, because you're using a phone and you're not like pushing it in the same way you push a computer, and it's, you know, it's not sitting on a desk like a computer, and the fans don't spin up like a computer, but like the performance was actually pretty similar on benchmarks. And so like I don't know what made them say like this is the time, but I don't know. I bought a 2018 MacBook Pro, and you can almost see it then that like this is the time. Like you have that, you know, I have a few computers in the house, all right, and like I've got this one, which is like a 2013 Mac Pro, which still kicks butt. I love this thing. I've got 2016 MacBook that my wife has, and I've got a 2018 MacBook Pro. And the 2016 MacBook, you could almost see it happening then, because it had no fan, and it had this mobile processor in it, but it was kind of slow, and it was kind of, you know, you couldn't push that one. You wouldn't want to edit a lot of video on it, and you'd just find the limits really fast. But you could almost squint and see the future a little bit by saying, like, this feels like an iPad. This is the weight of an iPad. I bet they're trying to do something with this. It only has the one plug, too. And they got rid of that computer, unfortunately. I loved that computer. That was a great computer.
That was going to be my opening question, and then we got on other things.
Oh.
A lot of people thought that when they so for someone who's like unaware of what all of this transition means, the consumer facing message is basically the same that any new upgrade of, like, better, faster, stronger, harder. Like, it's got better battery life. It's gonna be way more powerful. Like, these are things that if you don't follow any news about Apple, well, yeah, they're going to be better, but they're going to be so much substantially better that it's a little bit hard to articulate unless you do get into the technical stuff. I thought surely that now that Apple can make this chip and they can save on battery life and performance, that they would return to your darling MacBook, the little tiny, what do you call the?
It's the MacBook.
Because it's the Air has.
It's just the MacBook.
MacBook Air has for so long not meant any longer that it's as light as air. It's meant this is the one that most people buy that we give to the schools.
Yeah,
like
it's the Air Jordan.
It's exactly right. It's like, but the MacBook was actually smaller, thinner, and lighter, and you loved that thing.
Still love it. It's a great laptop for just general purpose, kicking around. I mean, EMG was still using it on stage last year. Like, it's a great laptop.
I thought surely they would make that.
No. As soon as they got rid of the butterfly keyboards, they're never going back to that. I mean, that was a big egg in the face for them. And that's what I was going to say, is that 2018 MacBook Pro, like, sucks. It's a good computer. Like, I like using it, I suppose. But, like, as far as, like, how it makes me feel when I'm using it, I feel like it is less reliable and less high-end than that little MacBook that came out a couple of years before. The keyboard on it has gunked up twice because of the butterfly keys. The little one, I felt like the keyboard did better on the little one because, I don't know, maybe it didn't get as hot. I don't know if that has something to do with it, but
I have the 2016 MacBook Pro, and I have replaced that keyboard 3 times.
Yeah, I mean, it eventually will break, and that's the sad part about it, because it's like, it was bold, it was adventurous, and it made them able to make this super thin thing, but like, the super thin thing it was too thin. It didn't work out. I would like to see this new one they came out with today. If it's thinner than the current MacBook Air, I think it is, because it has no fan, which is a similarity with the 2016 MacBook. And I was happy to see that. They brought back, they have ports. The one port was too few, mainly because a lot of times you're using your laptop while charging it. And if you don't have the right dingus to charge it and do HDMI at the same time, then just one port doesn't do the trick unless you have the exact right dongle. So like, I can see why they like went away from that. I feel like of the 3 that came out today, the MacBook Air is the one that I would like put the money on, as far as like, this is the one to check out because it's fanless. Like, if you have not used a fanless laptop before, it is magic. And it makes, as soon as you pick up a laptop with a fan in it again, you feel like you went back in time. You feel like you're back in the 1980s or something. As soon as that fan spins up, it's like your confidence just goes down.
Does this episode end in me buying a MacBook?
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. They said it's a 2-year transition, right? So this is year 1. I'm assuming the whole line will be transitioned by the end of 2021. And so what did they do today? They did the smallest stuff today. They did the MacBook Air and the 13-inch MacBook Pro, which is very similar to the MacBook Air in a lot of ways. They did the Mac Mini, which is also similar to the 13-inch MacBook Pro in a lot of ways. It's the same stuff, just laid out differently in a square shape. I think that it will be interesting to see these things on the market and see what it's like to use them in practice, because there's new things you can do, like running iOS apps, and there's things you can't do anymore, like running Windows, that may or may not have an impact to the average person. I have a feeling the average person buying a new MacBook Air is not even going to notice that they changed the processor. They're just going to be like, oh, this one's nice. Ooh, it's really quiet. You know, like they won't even notice why it's quiet. And I think I think that's the one that like a lot of people are going to probably get because it's a good price, and they're going to see a lot of benefit from the fact that it feels futuristic, and maybe they don't know exactly why. They just are going to know that it feels more like their phone, and that's going to be a good thing for a lot of people. I think they're going to really like that. I was talking to I was talking to some people in the industry, and like apps that are not yet native apparently do run really well on this new processor, which, you know, I'm waiting to see it to believe it, but if that's the case, then I don't think anybody will miss the Intel at all. If everything runs and it runs even better, even though it's not native, that's a big deal. I think that's a huge deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So in some ways, Apple is kind of just like slowly and quietly, because like sales of Macs are at an all-time high. People are buying them, you know, people who need one extras for the family, who are working at home or trying to simulate more professional working environments from their home office. Like the Mac sold a ton this past quarter, and it seems like what is happening today with these Macs that more or less look the same as their predecessors but have this new chip architecture, it seems like they're just quietly making their products that little bit more nicer, that, you know, that people recognize as that premium Apple quality, even if they don't necessarily know what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, you know, that's always been why people buy Apple stuff, is that nobody likes dealing with computers, and you feel like if you spend a little extra on an Apple computer, you'll have to deal with it less. You'll have more time to spend doing whatever it is you bought the computer to do. That's how I've seen it, at least, is that you're going to hassle less with it. And these are all things that lean into that narrative. Like battery life, I feel like people will immediately notice the better battery life. That's a big deal to have 18-hour battery life on a laptop. Is that what they said for one of them today? Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. That's like an Apple Watch. That's like crazy battery life. I mean, 6 hours is like normally what you get, right? Like, and I don't know if that's 18 hours of full blast computing, but still pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's super impressive. So here's the reason why I don't know if I want to pull the trigger on one of these. My 2016 MacBook Pros, ever since, so my third keyboard was the one right before they actually properly fixed the keyboards, where they would stick this little like layer.
Dude, the membrane it didn't fix it, man.
It didn't fix it. Now for me, it has been okay.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I trust that it's actually fixed. Like, it could go any day.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling okay. Here's where I think the other shoe might drop, and you can help me level my expectations, because, and this is one of the many reasons I want to talk about this, because, you know, you use a lot of this professional software way more aggressively than I do, between the video editing and all of the stuff you're doing in Ableton Live. So maybe you can help me to set my expectations correctly. I am a huge iOS power user. I love my iPad. Until we started doing all of our work at home for school, I was starting to even use the iPad for most of my schoolwork. It is portable. It's got my scores on it. I can annotate them. I can AirPlay it or plug it in and share it with my students. I can use it as a digital whiteboard. It's got almost all of the same apps, give or take a couple of professional standard music creation apps. I'm fast with Siri shortcuts. I can program it to do a couple of things that take a lot of time. Otherwise, I feel great about it. With a lot of, with iOS apps coming to the Mac and with Apple's different products sharing more and more of the same underlying technologies, I would love to believe that one of the things Apple can do with this new chip is rethink what a portable Mac looks like. A lot of people are talking about maybe they're optimizing the newest operating system for touch input. I don't see them doing that without bringing the Apple Pencil support to it. It's just they're trying to do too much unification behind what software developers have to do to make an app. So if they're going to bring in touch, I would imagine they would say, hey, listen, you just make an iPad app. It works on the Mac, every feature, all the way to someone touching the screen with an Apple Pencil. Now, no one wants to hold their Apple Pencil up to a screen that's vertical. So I would love to believe that we're going to see something one day that can be my all-in-one machine that will replace the need to have the giant iPad Pro at the front of the band classroom. What do you think? Am I dreaming here?
Oh man, that's the great question. I feel like a company like Apple thrives on the tension between those two ideas because that keeps you buying things, right? Like if they made something that suited all of your needs, then you wouldn't need the other thing. And I feel like I was with you actually on Big Sur looking like a touchscreen operating system to me. Like they spread the buttons out. They made it so everything had a little more room for maybe if you have to use your finger or a pencil or something. But then today they came out with stuff that looks and acts identically to the old machines. As far as like the design of the machines and like what they have on them as far as like hardware features. And I think that we're a while off from anything like what you just described. I think that they still, and there's evidence that they're right, is that there's a big niche for something that's like an iPad to be its own thing. I think that, a lot of people have given up on it because it's a tough niche to define, and maybe it's a niche that you can only do if you're making the hardware and software together to try to like invent all the rules as you go. It would move a lot slower if you couldn't do that. I think you see a lot of people just kind of like adding touch screens to laptops just because a lot of people use their phones and just expect screens to be touch screens, and it really doesn't like make the device any easier to use beyond maybe like that first time they interact with it. And it makes for a fun demo in the store. I don't know about the ergonomics of writing like this. It doesn't feel right to me. At the same time, you see them making the iPad more computer-like and allowing mouse input and things like that. So,
have you tried that, by the way?
I at the store, yeah, I tried it at the store once before everything.
It's really tasty.
Shut down.
It's very well implemented.
I really like the dot. I think that's clever. They made it not an arrow, like everything else. But it's like the iPad. It feels like it's the experiment zone for computer science right now, and that's right where it should be, in my opinion. I think the iPad should be like the Star Trek device that does some gee whiz stuff, and it gets changed a lot as it goes because it's very new. And I think that they're finally letting it be that, where for a while they really were like constraining it to do exactly what the phone does, and maybe holding it back a bit. So I like where that is. The computer, I don't know. I mean, I think that they must I mean, I think they don't want to make the Mac that kind of playground. Like, they want the Mac to be this, like, dependable, traditional version of what a computer does, and do that as good as you can possibly do it, and, you know, make it talk to all the gee whiz new stuff, but how you use it. You know, I think what they picture is, like, at some point in the chain of computer science stuff, there has to be the thing that you code everything on, and they must not think the iPad's the right tool for that, because it's not. You know, it's like,
well, but here's the thing though. My iPad, my 12 point whatever it is iPad plugged into that keyboard attachment with the cursor. There is no reason that when docked, things would get all sorts of crazy when you stripped it off that stand. What should happen, but when it's docked, no reason that thing can't run macOS. Absolutely not.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, except that, okay, so here's something, let me tie this back into today's announcement, because we're kind of like pie in the sky right now, but okay, so today they announced 3 new machines, and one thing that I noticed is that there are very few build-to-order options for these machines. Mainly, what's missing is any kind of build-to-order on the processor. You get the M1 because you want this because it has this M1, whatever the M1 is, whatever speed it runs at, who knows? It runs at 50 different speeds. Who knows? Like, no, they didn't talk about that at all. They showed a geographic diagram of maybe what's happening on the chip, which is a really, you know, I don't know if I can pull this diagram up and look at it, but I mean, I'm assuming that that's not an actual diagram of the chip, but that it's maybe based somewhat in reality of, like, what the chip maybe prioritizes. And okay, yeah, here's a picture of the chip. Oh no, it went away. It's like animated. Learn more about M1. Maybe I can pull this up. Okay, here it is. Yeah, this is the picture I'm talking about. Okay, so this chip is like 1/8 of it is the CPU. Is that like what I'm seeing here?
I got it. Hold on. I'm only looking at it through your end of the Zoom call.
So like, yeah, it's like a small part of it's the CPU, and half of the CPU is efficiency cores. So, like, I don't know what level I'm getting at all at any point, because I'm supposed to trust that this thing is smart enough that it's going to manage that for me. So they've kind of done this like sleight of hand with the processor, where normally I'd be thinking, I mean, even with, you know, go back to my beloved 2016 MacBook, came in the 3, you know, the M3, the M5, and the M7, or whatever those like weird processors that Intel made were. Kind of interesting that they had the same name. Okay, so like I knew that those ran at different speeds. I knew that they had a different amount of bandwidth because they were the bigger processor or whatever. But instead of that, you get to pick RAM. They do have that you can pick between 8 and 16 gigs of RAM on these computers. And I was just reading a little bit right before we started recording that if you have the 256 gig versus the 512 gig, you get one less GPU core. So you get like 8 GPU cores with the 512 gig and 7 with the 256 gig. I mean, it's just weird, you know, and it's way more like what you'd find with a game console than what you'd find with like a proper computer. So I think it's kind of interesting because it totally changes like the math on like what you're trying to buy. And maybe this whole like, you know, make the iPad Mac-like enough for somebody who doesn't, you know, maybe they're choosing between a Chromebook, an iPad, and a Mac, and you make it enough like a Mac to like pass, but still break-proof like a Chromebook, you know, or something like that. And maybe they feel like that's the sweet spot. And also, if you do go the Mac route, it's got processors that are going to be powerful enough for your video editing, for your Xcode or whatever you're, you know, running OBS and doing a Zoom call and recording in Ableton Live on the other screen like I'm doing right now. versus they don't picture you doing that on an iPad, so they give you less processor, so they make it run a whole different OS at a certain point to make it so it's constrained. I think that's like probably smart. I think it will be really interesting to see over the year if there will be other processors than the M1, because the M1 seems like a very appropriate processor for like the first tier of stuff. And I imagine we will see an M1 in an iMac at some point this year. I don't imagine we'll see an M1 in a Mac Pro at any point, though. It's got to be better than an M1. It's got to be at least an M2. What is an M2? I don't know. It's one more than an M1, but if I'm paying for something really expensive, it better have at least two M's, because one's not good enough.
Your Mac is missing an M.
Yeah, and I think that'll be the interesting thing to see how they break away from the traditional like product map of like what Intel would have, where they usually have like a good, better, best of every processor that they make in multiple speeds. And like they're trying really hard. I mean, Apple's never liked talking about the speeds as the first thing. And with the phones, they famously don't talk about any of those specs. They don't talk about RAM or cores, really. Outside of the product announcement, they only how much storage do you want? And it looks like they're doing a little bit of that with their laptops, which, if these things are as good in practice as they say, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we don't need to think about it as much, and it's, it becomes a little more like when you buy a Tesla, and if you want more mileage, you just pay a little more, and it's the same stuff, but they just crank it up if you paid more.
Yeah. All right. For anyone who doesn't quite follow the chip stuff, and maybe a little bit for me, break down the performance for me a little bit, because I see this MacBook Air, and in the chart that they showed, they did actually show one chart that was like showing like their chip in comparison to another, and it was like a graph with an X and a Y axis, but I think in the tech industry,
what do they call these? They call these Jeff Bezos graphs.
Yeah, it's a Bezos chart, right? There's no actual numbers on the Y and the X axis to prove anything.
Oh yeah,
it's better.
It's better, and it's better. Yeah, it's
the line goes higher for their chip than it does.
Numbers going up. I mean, I think what this says though is that this is information that has been around for a while about like, comparing apples to apples, like a phone chip versus like an Intel desktop chip. And just the fact that they're making them at the kind of bandwidth level that you would need for a full computer now. I mean, this has been possible for a while. I think that this is like why they had PowerPC processors back in the day, is they felt like there was some sort of favorable efficiency to them at one point in time. And then, Intel had the same kind of favorable efficiency. This looks very similar to a graph they presented when they switched to Intel processors and said performance per watt, whatever that means, whatever performance, what's the like gigaflops per watt? Like, sure. I don't know like what unit they're using for that, but I mean, this is a little fuzzy. I think this is a little fuzzy too. This like 15 times faster machine learning performance, and then it has footnote 8. Compared to what? Compared to Core i3 based Mac Mini systems. And so this is like comparing something that's like in a way you're taking something that like is a task more suited to something that's like a GPU, and comparing how did the CPU do versus our thing that's like a GPU. If I understand how these neural engine parts of the processor are, is like they're kind of like a big parallel processing thing, a little bit like, I don't know.
So I guess the question is like, where is the, maybe it's the average person isn't the best way. Someone like me, I consider myself to be, I go beyond the average consumer, but I don't depend on my computer to do giant video projects for my livelihood. So I did, however, I have made some of these post-pandemic virtual band videos where I've got like 60 videos being processed in Final Cut at the same time.
Yeah.
And I'm on my 2016 MacBook, and it's all maxed out with all whatever the best stuff you could get in late 2015 is when I bought it. But it's got all that stuff maxed out. And I hit like the 20th to the 25th video that's being processed simultaneously, and Final Cut starts cutting frames out of my preview, and my fan turns all the way up, but it will reluctantly allow me to continue dragging and dropping other videos into that same project. I'll see a bunch of beach balls, but I'll do it. I can do the project. Like, for someone like me who's traditionally bought the top of the line laptop, and I know we can't compare it because it's a different year, it's a different model, it's a different chip, but like, does a MacBook Air with the M1 seem like something that can replace the need for someone like me to have my Mac be this giant powerful machine? I just don't. It seems like the performance increases enough that I would never, like, whatever the M2 is or whatever they put in, if they make a 16-inch MacBook Pro that you can max out with the top specs later this year, I just don't see that being a thing that I would ever push even to like 25%.
Yeah, I mean, they're always going to make you find ways to use your computer, right? I mean, if you had a first generation iPad and you just bust it out today and load up NewYorkTimes.com, it's going to drag that thing to the ground. I mean, just the world moves forward, right? And video moves forward. What I am interested in with the M1, with the situation you just described, is that whole fan spinning up problem. Earlier this year, I bought my wife like the maxed out Mac Mini i7 with the best specs that you could get, and that thing blew up every time we fired up OBS. I mean, just the fans going like crazy, and this is like a brand new machine. It was behaving just as poorly as like the 2018 MacBook Pro that I had, doing the same thing. And I think that's where they hit the wall with Intel at some point. I don't know what the wall was exactly, if it was GPU integration that was the problem, or just like pure speed, or like thermal stuff. I don't know. They don't usually get into like why they dumped the old thing. They just talk about how much better the new thing is. But I mean, this computer here, that it has almost the same exact specs as that 2019, I think it was a 2020 Mac Mini that I had. This thing blows it away for some reason. And there was something in the bandwidth that was just like ill-suited to those tasks. So I do think that like video has become a heavier thing than maybe Intel predicted. People editing 4K video, people editing lots of streams of 1080p. I think that something, with the attributes that they described today would probably be better suited for that. But there's no way to know until you try one out. I mean, we have no idea.
But coming back to this whole thing about like the iPhone sort of benchmarking really favorably, I've always noticed that my iOS devices feel way snappier, but at the end of the day, as many times as I see the beach ball making my band video, Final Cut Pro still exports the video like a boss. Like, it does a fine job. And I mean, does that kind of break down to single versus multi-core processing? Is that kind of what I'm noticing, is that single core performance is way, way better with Apple's chip, and so therefore my iPhone and my iPad apps feel super breezy? Or
that's interesting. I don't know exactly, comparing like UI snappiness to video export. It's like video export is a more like predictable kind of task.
Yeah.
And iPhones are really aggressive about shutting off processes in the background where computers aren't. So I think the iPhone has always done kind of some tricks to make you feel like it's faster than it is. Going back to the very first one where, every app's opening screen just looked like the app, so that it like looked like it loaded instantly and stuff like that. But it'll be really interesting to see like content producers really put this thing to the test. I think it's, really intriguing that apps that are not yet optimized for M1 are reported to be running well. And the developers they brought on that thing today when they had Cable Sasser on there, it's like he's not going to lie about that, probably.
No, in the nerdiest way possible. The fact that he and Ken Case from the Omni Group were in that video.
Oh, yeah. These are like, they were definitely trying to appeal to like the long-term Mac developers with that people they had on there. And, just the whole like, we care about you people who have been in this for the long haul. I think that's what they were trying to get across with that. Even down to bringing in John Hodgman at the end for the joke. But yeah, I mean, ramifications for music ed, since this is music ed tech talk, right? Like,
Yep.
I feel like if there are fewer build to order possibilities, then it might be easier to buy these. Right? It might be easier to choose and buy. Just say, give me the 2020 MacBook Air, whatever that is. And, I think the year of the computer will probably matter a lot now, because that'll probably be right in sync with the chip, just like it is with the phone. I mean, down to, how funny would it be, by the way, if, let's say they do upgrade the Mac with a bunch of features that, you were talking about pencils and stuff like that. What if they came out with the Mac SE, just like the old days? They call it the SE, but they give it the new chip. How funny would that be? It would be just like what they do with the phone. It could be a good thing for the life cycle of these computers. It's possible that you could get these and hang on to them for a little longer, especially if the battery lasts as long as they say.
You mentioned, I don't want to derail what you're saying, but you mentioned Apple in education. I mean, you're in a position where I feel like if you've got such a history of running Mac OS in your lab that if you need to replace your computers, it's Mac OS. More broadly speaking, and this is why maybe this is a tangent, but like, do you feel like Apple has lost a strong foothold in education? This is like I feel like our teacher issued and the stuff that's in the tech labs in our school district, like the Apple stuff is always on the chopping block. And I can't help but believe, especially now that we've seen Chromebooks just get put into every kid in the country's hands, I can't help but think that Apple has like really kind of screwed themselves with education. And the point of that blog post I posted, I was actually sort of link blogging to something that Bradley Chambers wrote on 9to5Mac, suggesting how this chip transition could allow Apple to make potentially a more affordable computer for education.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, they dropped the prices on all of these already, which is crazy, right?
Does their store say they're still selling the previous MacBook Air, the one that was $999 before today? It's gone.
That's gone. Yeah, MacBook Airs are all M1s now.
It seems like the legacy of the Tim Cook era is that they're just going to keep selling that MacBook Air no matter what until the end of time, whatever the last generation.
Well, I mean, the legacy of the Tim Cook era is that eventually these guys are going to make the whole widget. They're not going to source parts anymore. They make all their own stuff, which is, that's what you always pictured Apple doing, but that's never been the reality until recently.
Right. Well, being like kind of like a supply guy and being sort of more managing that part of things, it makes sense that he would,
Yeah, he's like, if we're paying this company to make chips and they own the factories, let's just buy the factories and make the chips ourselves, and then nobody else can have them. I think that's a pretty good strategy, especially for some things like, what's another component that's like that for them is like maybe the cameras in the iPhone. And, I think famously like Sony makes those. They have made those camera modules for a while now. And, how long is that going to last? That's what I always wonder. I don't know. Did Apple screw up by not making Chromebooks? I mean,
not by not making Chromebooks. Like Apple has a very app-centric model of how everything in their entire ecosystem works together. It's like you look at something, even something like a consumer product like the Amazon Echo. Like how do you? Oh, it's gonna go off behind me. Oh no, because I didn't say her name. So like, I can, on my little lady in a can in my dining room, I can set up a service. I can like go to the Headspace app and I can go into my Echo app and say, okay, load this service that Headspace, the meditation app, offers, which basically will allow the Echo to, on their servers, run an instance of the Headspace app so that I can tell any one of my little devices around the house, hey, I want to meditate, and then it'll start streaming Headspace meditations to the thing. Whereas Apple says, well, we make a smart speaker too, but with your HomePod, you're going to instead program a Siri shortcut on your phone, and then the HomePod is just, when you say I want to meditate, it's just going to like open a version of the app on your phone, and then we'll just play it through the speaker. It's a different kind of model, and I feel like in education.
Well, okay, why make anything for education? All right, like first off, like let's think about it like as if we were running a business here, and education markets like cheap stuff, and education markets like free software. And they like a lot of things that are not necessarily profitable. And so when Apple was first like getting started, they were famously pretty big in education because they figured if we get a bunch of kids used to using Apple computers in school, then they'll go out and buy them when they're grown-ups. And that's a decent strategy. Do they need that strategy today? I don't think so. I think that people have iPhones because that's a whole different thing that they got people to buy their stuff because of wanting a good cell phone. And, at the time that was happening, most schools didn't even let you have cell phones in the school. So it was just different, right? And so now, why does Google, have a bunch of manufacturers making the cheapest possible laptops that run Chrome OS, which I would say at best is a very neglected operating system, and at worst is just like a lazy half measure. Schools don't really care about the quality of these devices. They just need them to be good enough, right? They need to be good enough to give tests on, and that's like it. Load web pages or whatever. So what's in Google's interest is data, right? They just want to scoop up all the data they can because even if it's anonymized, that data is useful for advertisers and it's useful for their targeted ads. So it's in their interest to give a bunch of stuff to schools for free because they're getting all kinds of information about what kids at all ages are searching for and interested in and saving on their Google Drives and emailing each other about, and et cetera, et cetera. It's exactly the kind of thing that Apple's not interested in. So they didn't go for it. They could have made a very cheap iPad, as everybody saw, like a lot of people made cheap tablets to try to compete with the iPad, that had a keyboard. They could have made one and captured market share, but Apple is counterintuitive to some people because they never try to capture market share. They don't care about market share. They care about profit share. And if there's like in part of the business that they're in, if they're getting 20% of the market but 90% of the profits, that's mission accomplished for them. They don't need that other totally. 80% of the market. So
it seems like kids who are growing up on Chromebooks are still buying MacBooks when they go off to college.
Yeah, it's not like it's cutting into their business because everybody knows these things are just like cheap school laptops that nobody really likes. They just use them because they have to. The only people who like their Chromebook are people who don't necessarily like laptops to begin with and just need something to do their email on and toss it in a bag and not worry if you're going to break it. They would want something cheap anyway, usually, people who really like them.
Yeah, they do have, though, like this education platform, which is, and this is why I brought up the Echo thing, is like they have this whole like classroom app on the iPad where if you dish out a one-to-one iPad scenario, they've got a whole API where third-party education apps can link into the classroom. So it's like you're in the classroom app as a student, you're in your class, and then you link, but instead of getting linked out from Canvas to some other web app like Noteflight or Soundtrap, instead you get booted out to a third-party app that's native, and it's
Right.
a very different strategic difference. It's this app focused versus sort of like web and services focused thing. But I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's. I don't know anyone who uses Apple Classroom. I mean, is it
No,
pretty
nor do
much?
I don't know anyone who's using it. I think uh, I almost want to say too little, too late on that. I think that maybe they underestimated just how pervasive Google Classroom is. Um, because teachers aren't necessarily going out into the marketplace and selecting the management tool they want to use. It's just they use whatever the school tells them to use usually.
Sure,
So
sure.
I just feel like that came after everybody was already on Google, and Google made everybody a deal they couldn't refuse, right? Like you get all this stuff together and you don't have to do IT work ever again. And I mean, that was just too good of a deal, I think. That Apple really wasn't in that market either. That's not really, Classroom's there if you have nothing else. So I don't know where people are using that, but I imagine there's some schools in the San Francisco Bay Area that like are using it and are demonstrating how good it is. But like, yeah, as for being widespread, I don't see anybody really even. I see most people don't even know about it, I guess.
Yeah, that's more or less my experience. So sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent, but I was curious your thoughts on that. Yeah, and well, tell me. So speaking to music education, if you had other thoughts on that.
New detail. I'm just like refreshing all the pages as we go.
Yeah.
The MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro have the same exact M1 chips. There are no upgrades. The only difference is that the MacBook Pro can run hotter, so it uses its efficiency cores less.
Huh.
Isn't that weird? I mean, that's just a totally different game, man. I mean, this is like new frontier. It's
so interesting. Who would buy that? At least without any knowledge of, no experience.
That's why I'm saying
them.
the Air is the one to bet on. I would like nobody cares about upgrading a MacBook Air. It's going to do what it did out of the box, and you're probably never going to upgrade it. It's just, the self-contained unit where like I feel like the MacBook Pro is the harder sell because I'm already reading things like it's not compatible with eGPUs. It has fewer Thunderbolt ports than the one that already existed. Now, the MacBook Air is all M1 now, but the MacBook Pro is not, including the 13-inch. You can still buy the higher-end Intel MacBook Pros. So that's what I'm saying. Is like I don't think the M1 is like the end of the story here at all. I think the M1 is that's like the Intel Core i5 maybe, and then there's going to be a couple above that exist to suit other needs. Because compatibility is going to be an issue when you get to those pro machines.
Well, let's talk about that. So you use a ton of audio video software, probably a handful of third-party plugins. What's going to be the short-term story for this and audio software? It'll eventually all get worked out.
Yeah, no, it'll eventually all get worked. I think the short-term story for audio software is just going to be compatibility with like everybody updating their drivers and stuff. We're going to have to see if, for one, if Big Sur has issues with people's interfaces and stuff like that, and then if this new processor has issues, because like if your audio interface is just like not compatible yet, you're going to hold off. And I mean, audio people are already like super hesitant to upgrade their stuff usually. So like, I mean, I'm going to be hesitant about upgrading this computer to Big Sur just based on my experience using it on my laptop over the summer, which is not a bad experience. I just let everybody work the bugs out first, right? I think it will be really interesting to see what the Thunderbolt quirks are, because Thunderbolt it's always been quirky, and there's always because that taps in deeper into the system than USB. It'll be really interesting to see how that goes. Like I noticed that the new Mac Mini has fewer ports than the old Mac Mini. I don't know if you noticed that too.
I didn't notice that, no.
So the old one had 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports, and the new one has 2. So there's something about the M1 that means less bandwidth in a way. So I'm sure they're working on the big bandwidth, workstation class version of it. But, for right now, like, you know what I'd love to see something more like this computer that,
It's rumored. I read a rumor on, I think, Bloomberg about a small Mac Pro in the works using this new chip.
I mean, this thing gets a bad rap because they replaced everything with this model, but this is a great computer. And the thermals were the problem with it. So, like, if they're going to this, like, integrated process or whatever where you can fit a lot more on one chip, I mean, I don't see why everybody needs the Mac. Like, if you need a professional computer, it's nice to have some upgradability. I've upgraded a bunch of things on this computer. I don't need to upgrade everything on it. I obviously can't upgrade the GPUs in it. That would be nice compared to, like, the big Mac Pro, which, I mean, that'll almost trip your circuit breaker if you plug it into a regular house. I mean, that thing draws as much as you're allowed to draw off a wall outlet, I think. So, like, I would love to see something that was a lower power version of that.
A lower power Mac Pro. So I had the 2008 Mac Pro, and it was a regular part of my life for 10, 11 years. And I upgraded almost everything I could inside of it during those 10 years. I absolutely would buy a more, consumer, as far as the price goes at least, just a more consumer-friendly Mac Pro model that was a little smaller and more compact. I totally would do it, but probably more than an iMac. I've never been an iMac person, and I think that's because I've never actually. I think when you're, like, logged into all your stuff and you can just sit down at it and, like, it just boots right up and you're there, the screen is all integrated. I think that's a feeling that is probably very valuable that I've just never experienced in my life. It seems very valid because, like, for me, I've got my MacBook plugged into an external monitor, all these Bluetooth keyboards and mice and things. Like, it's not a pleasant experience. Certainly not as much as just tapping one button on an iMac and then everything is ready to go. But I don't know. I would probably still go for a Mac Pro if given the option to have something more affordable. We'll see, because the iMac is supposed to get an update too. Do you think they'll redesign that one in a major way?
That's the big question. I think that at least one of these computers needs to look a little different. But I don't think it will at first. I think this is the same playbook from the Intel transition, where the first batch of computers looked identical to the old ones to signal the fact that there's no compatibility problems, is what they're trying to project to the average person, that, like, this is just a new Mac. It's the same Mac that you liked. And, you tell people about the processor and they don't know what that means. They're, it's like, we flim-flammed the who's what's it or whatever, and it's like, I by the way, today's keynote it had to be the most, like, technical jargon I've ever seen in an Apple keynote.
Oh yeah.
It sounded at times like that YouTube video of, like, the turbo encabulator where the guy's just, like, saying a bunch of terms that don't mean anything. Like, I think it's awesome that they went that direction with it, because it's like, who's this for? But anyway, yeah, I'm excited about it. Now, I'm bummed out that they didn't release AirTags at all this year. I don't know if those are ever going to come out.
Are you really going anywhere where you would lose your keys right now?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. But they did release new phones, so.
They did release new phones. Yeah, did you? So I guess I got a couple other.
I've got my case today.
You got your case. Did you buy the iPhone Professional big one?
Yeah, I bought the Max.
Okay, I also did. It ships, I think, Friday.
So that's what it looks like in the hand. I've never owned one of the big ones before, so.
Oh boy. Oh, you're in for that plus a case. Oh, it's gonna be big.
I mean, the case has, like, a thing around the cameras now that, like, sticks up to, because I guess the lenses, the lenses stick out more.
I read that in the John Gruber iPhone review today.
Yeah.
So this is a plus a max size phone, and I'm used to it now. But I can imagine that going up to this size and adding a case will be a noticeable jump, to say the least.
Yeah, I wanted to try that new camera. I mean, all that new camera stuff looked too good to not try.
Yep, I'm excited about it. I am a caseless person, and even more so now that I don't go anywhere.
Yeah, I've been going caseless since the pandemic started, and my phone does not look as good as it used to. It's got a little hairline crack in it and stuff, so I think I need the case.
I think mine is doing okay. I let my 10-month-old also, he just like plays with it. I don't know. I'm a little reckless. Don't follow my example.
Dude, both of our iPhone XS, 10s models, the Face ID stopped working.
Huh.
Both of them.
Interesting.
And it's just, and it was just like sitting in the sun by the pool. I don't know if it got a little water on it or if the sun cooked it. But the same thing happened to both of ours at different times. So I'm really hoping the new one fixed that.
Well, it'll certainly fix that. I am actually the most, now that I'm really thinking about it, I'm the most reckless iPhone user that I know, because not only do I not use a case, I actually got in the hot tub with it in the pocket of my swimming shorts the other day. And
I mean, I do stuff like that all the time because you're supposed to be able to splash it, right? Like that's what it says.
Yeah.
And doing a little bit of that combined with like mine got toasted when we were in Singapore, combined with like that sunlight, in a tropical climate.
Right.
It kills it, man. It kills it dead.
I take it into it kills it. I take it into the shower too to listen to podcasts. I do. I just put it right on I'm less worried about the water and more worried it's going to like slip off of the little ledge that I.
Yeah.
Dude. So you got a new phone. Did you get anything? Because there was also an Apple Watch. What else did they announce at the previous two events this year? Like HomePod. Are you into the HomePod stuff?
Dude, I love HomePods. I've got one paired to my TV right now.
Yeah.
And just one. I don't have a stereo pair. I just like moved it by the TV, and I was like, you know what? Like, because we would like redid our living room, and I got like those like reactive ambient lights to go behind the TV.
Nice.
Which is sick. And then I was like, why don't we just like put the HomePod here? And it works great. It sounds fine. Like I don't care that it's not stereo most of the time, but it totally screws up AirPlaying to the Apple TV when you're also AirPlaying from the Apple TV to a HomePod constantly.
Oh, interesting.
It does not like doing that. So that's the only like hiccup. But yeah, my daughter's very interested in the HomePod Mini. And you said that Alexa stuff earlier. I could not be like less interested in apps for a smart speaker beyond like play the thing that I'm talking about, or maybe set a timer. Like, well,
that's okay. So that's
remind
90%
me to
of
do
it.
this. Like, I don't use it for these like really advanced features that some people do, because it's like I feel like when I see people demoing it, it feels like I'm watching somebody like talk a command line, and I'm just not into it, I guess.
Well, but okay. So in fairness, so like the Echo stuff, you do kind of have to talk to it like a command line. It requires you to say it's almost like a verbal syntax that you have to say to get it to, but once you get it right, it will do what you say every time and fast. Whereas the Apple stuff, you can speak to the HomePod much more conversationally, but Siri, come on. Like, it's just, there are times where I'm just like, what are you even thinking? Like when I talk to it, it's like, how did I ask for directions to the local grocery store, which in our area is giant, and you gave me one that's in a different state? I don't understand that. Like, you have so much information about me and my history. How do you do that? And so but there are shining moments of hope. Like for me in the HomePod, and this is why I'm so excited about the Mini, because the HomePod is a pretty decent smart speaker, but like I'm living in this dream world of I just want to be able to basically talk out loud and have my computers do stuff. And we've got some of this HomeKit automation stuff in the house. I've got a Siri shortcut that automatically when my morning Apple Watch alarm starts buzzing my wrist, when I hit the stop button on an alarm, all of a sudden a timer that reminds me to take my medication and then not eat for an hour turns on. All the lights turn on, the blinds in the living room open, the air temperature changes, my podcast app starts running. All this craziness just happens, and I've got a similar one for booting down at night. Like,
That's
lights
cool.
turn off, the TV turns off, and I'm just saying that into thin air.
I'm like transitioning from having the Ikea smart lights to having the Philips smart lights, and the Ikea smart lights are just not smart. Like, they always get unhooked from the bridge or whatever. Like, they eventually forget who they are, and yeah, I've had a little bit of hassle with that. I really like the HomeKit secure video. I have a couple of cameras that don't talk to their app. They just talk to HomeKit. And I really like that because, A, you don't have to like pay for some service to have your video. And B, it just like, it processes it all on device, which is also kind of nice. It's a little faster and, a little more secure too.
I'm a little iffy on this because I have for a long time wanted a smart doorbell, and there actually is about to be one for sale in the United States that is HomeKit compatible. But I have actually, I don't want to say hacked, but I am currently using Nest Google doorbells. The Hello is the product name. I'm currently using one of those in combination with this little smart bridge called a Starling.io. And this group of developers, it's basically are you familiar with Homebridge?
Oh yeah, I'm running Homebridge right now to try to like make my IKEA lights work with. I mean, it's just like a disaster though. Like, if you're having to run Homebridge, it's just like having the real thing is better than that, because like at least on mine,
it absolutely is.
Like, I have to have my computer on. It has to be like on Mac OS. Like, my son comes down and plays Squadrons down here and forgets to change it back to being a Mac, like, the lights stop working. It's not a long-term solution at all.
No, it's not. But there are categories of things that that HomeKit doesn't even recognize unless you run a Homebridge. So we got a Dyson air purifier.
Okay.
It's not a category that HomeKit recognizes, but you can, through Homebridge, it'll like turn, not only will it like, it'll like separate the different features of it into like different, like turning it on and off as a smart switch. How fast or how cool it blows the air is like shows up as a fan in Homebridge. And so you can automate this stuff. So these are parts of my, my nighttime, little shortcut that automatically triggers is like changing the air temperature of the fan and like how fast the fan is blowing in the room in addition. So it's a pretty cool thing. But someone makes
that's really cool. I have one of those. I should try that.
Oh, it's great. It's a little bit hacky, but if I can do it, you can do it. It's pretty easy. We actually
awesome.
We found one on Crazy Sale because my wife was our son's nursery is like really freaking cold, and sleep is important to us. So we bought a second one to try to keep his room more under control. And I haven't put that one on the Homebridge yet, but I need to because I've got a real good Siri shortcut that's called Theo Bedtime, and it plays those like binaural beats out of a little speaker in his room, and then it dims the lights, so that he gets sleepy.
That's so cool.
Yeah, but before I forget, so the Starling IO thing is these guys basically put Homebridge in a little hub that you can buy for like $80, and we have enough Nest stuff in the house that I finally just pulled the trigger on it. You plug it in, you go to a website, and it's like magic. It takes all of your Nest products and boom, they're in HomeKit. All of your smoke detectors.
That's pretty cool, actually. What's it called again?
Starling.io.
Okay. I might look into that because that sounds very appealing.
It's awesome. And they are saying that they're slowly picking off all of the doorbell features. Like now you can talk back through the Nest doorbell using the Apple Home app, not the Nest app. There's like the new iOS 14 has person detection, and the people who make this little hub are already on top of that. So HomeKit will now like recognize certain people at your door through the Home app, not even through the Nest. So, they're saying, they've told me that they think they're going to be able to somehow hack HomeKit secure video. I don't know how they're going to do that, but I'm looking forward to it because I've waited for 5 years to get a HomeKit doorbell. We had what did we have? The Ring at our old house. and they were promising it for years and years and years. It never came.
Okay, this is pretty cool. I might get one of these, actually.
Do you have Nest stuff?
I don't have any Nest stuff, but it would just be nice to not have to worry about compatibility.
I'm not going to tell you that Google will not make a change that'll break it, but so far it's working really well.
Dude, that's awesome.
You can even, I'm really tempted by one of these Google Home hubs. It'll even hack into the Google Home hub and use the camera in the Google as like a HomeKit camera.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
It's nuts. By the way, how long do you have? I can go forever, but
I mean, I'm enjoying the conversation. I'll tell you what, I'd love to go shopping with you sometime. That would be a fabulous use of our time next time we're in the same town. Just like, go to an Apple store, go to a Best Buy or something. That would be great. Oh,
we should.
man.
Well, I get nuts with this home automation stuff. It's like really the home and the also the health tracking stuff, like the way that like different apps can all like sort of feed into that health app. These are just two areas where for some reason I started getting real nerdy.
Yeah, I think it's like a rabbit hole you can really go down, and I always start to lose my patience with it because I'm fiddling with it for so long, and I'm like, it's just easier to not have this sometimes.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there are times where especially the home stuff will temporarily break or have an issue. Like right now, our left garage door is unresponsive.
Oh my gosh!
And I know it's the fault of the manufacturer of the little hub. And they sent me a nice email with instructions how to fix it, and I'm just like, it's not going to take me this long, but for some reason, just the way that it makes me feel when I set up this thing it feels like an afternoon. It's the kind of thing where I'm going to have to
Well,
open this
I'll tell you
email.
the smart home thing that I got that I would swear by, and it is a little expensive, but it is an excellent use of your money if you can swing it, is the Philips Hue Play sync lights for your TV. And it's just lights that go on the back of your TV, and you need two parts. This is what's expensive. You need the lights and you need the sync box, and the sync box takes your HDMI and makes it match the lights. And
oh my goodness.
It is like magic. Whenever I'm watching TV, this thing looks sick, and I love it, and it makes our furniture look cool because we've got this bookcase on either side of it, and it's everything lights up the color of the TV, and it's like magic when you see it, and it looks so cheesy but it looks awesome in real life, and I'm thrilled with it every time I sit down and watch TV.
This is $230 just for the sync box. This is nuts, but I'm all about this.
You can find a used one, I'm sure.
This is crazy. So to me, I feel like my TV is it's like a canvas, and I want to frame it. For some reason, I don't know, maybe if I were in your house watching your TV, I would feel like, oh, this is amazing.
My TV is a cheap TV. I don't have an expensive TV at all. And I've got Ikea furniture around it, so it's just cheap white furniture, and the walls are kind of a light gray, and it's I don't know, it classes up the joint a lot. I'm really pleased with how it turned out.
I just don't know. Does it make you feel like you're in some futuristic bar when you watch it, or is it?
Well, it makes me to me it gives the illusion that the TV is bigger than it is, because the color extends past your field of vision a little bit.
Right.
It is silly, but I was okay, when we did the living room and we saw the furniture and they wanted some kind of light in the middle, and I was just started looking up I think one of the kids brought down one of those cheap LED strips and put it behind the TV and set it to a color we liked, but then it made this high-pitched hum that I could hear, and everybody's like, I can't hear that. This hum is why are you so picky about this? Can't you just enjoy nice things, Will? And I was like, I can't hear this all day. This is a crazy sound. To me, it's a crazy sound. I can't stand it. And so I started researching what's a better LED strip, and then I find these, and I was just like, that's pretty cool. It's been totally worth it.
Absolutely, yeah. The Philips Hue stuff is awesome, and it's easy to use.
Yeah, it works really well so far, especially compared to the IKEA stuff. So maybe the IKEA stuff's better now, but Generation 1 was not reliable. But yeah, I probably should get going soon.
Yeah, let me see here. So we talked about Apple events. I was going to ask you if there are any iOS apps you're excited about coming to the Mac, since that's a new thing. Maybe. Oh, whoa, hold on. If you have limited time, we got to do app and album of the week. It can be fast.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a sequence. I'm sorry. What am I trying to say? What's the word I'm looking for? It's a
copyrighted segment of this broadcast.
A copy. Yeah, exactly. Your app of the week is relevant to our discussion earlier about Ableton, I think.
Ableton Live 11 beta.
I mean, I'm excited just for all of you Ableton users that you finally get flats.
It's got sharps and flats. It's a big upgrade.
That's like the only thing I saw about it on Twitter, and then I was reading a little bit about it. The tempo follow thing looks really interesting to me too. But I'm sure you can.
Yeah, I haven't gotten a chance to try that out actually. That looks really interesting. All of the MIDI editing got a big upgrade. The scale folding stays in sync with what you do on the push. So if you set the push to a particular scale, MIDI clips can also show that scale now, which is really nice. There's a lot of interesting like compositional stuff for randomizing note velocities or even like note probabilities. So you can like have a sequence and give different notes a probability of happening or not. So you get this like fresh kind of sequence every time it loops. I think stuff like that's kind of cool. The take comping is like essential, like finally kind of upgrade. Like that's probably the biggest one, is doing multiple takes. And something I'm going to be demoing at the Detroit user group in a couple weeks is using the take comping to edit video, which is kind of crazy, but at the same time, I think it's a slightly better interface for multi-angle camera editing than what you'd find in Final Cut Pro. So it's you can edit multiple streams of video just by swiping over the parts you want, and it'll comp it together automatically for you.
That's awesome. I gotta get that back on my computer. I had a job, a side gig that I had a licensed copy of Ableton for. It was like a church job where they wanted like backup tracks for the band and stuff. So I was like making these like sequences where like my terminology is not fresh. In session view, I would have like what do you call a row? What's the word for a row?
A scene?
Thank you, a scene. I would have like a scene for each song, which was more or less just run like a bunch of backup tracks to supplement what was happening on a bunch of like productions that were happening. So it was cool. I was having a lot of fun playing with it and learning it. I haven't done that gig for like 2+ years, so I gotta get a personal copy of it because 11 seems cool. I'm just kind of coasting in Logic these days, making my play along tracks and my recording my podcast. But Ableton, I gotta get on this and maybe check out 11. I thought we did mine. We talked about Neural Mix. I even have it written down to talk about it at this time, and then I blew it. It just opened.
Hey, you can always edit it back in.
I can. I don't think I will. It's good. I will. You know what though? I'll give an honorable mention just to be timely. Have you ever used this iPhone app Fantastical for calendar stuff?
No, I've never used it actually. I've heard about it.
Their headlining feature is you can type into the new event field like lunch with John tomorrow at 3 p.m. and it'll like just boom, it'll like kind of parse it all out for you and make an event out of it. But I've been doing like putting widgets on my phone, and they've got a really good, I really thought it would take up all my app real estate to start putting widgets on my home screen, but it turns out that I really like every time I open my phone seeing my next couple of calendar events there. They have a really, really good widget that shows you the month and also like your next 3 or 4 events. And you can even though the little month numbers are like super tiny, like a couple pixels each, you can like tap really precisely on one of them and it'll take you straight to that day in your calendar.
That's pretty cool.
I appreciate that detail.
So you said app and album of the week, right?
Yeah, are you listening? And usually album is meant broadly just like a musical experience. Sometimes people mention like a piece or a concert they went to or even a playlist they listen to on Spotify.
Yeah, okay. All right. So 2 new albums that I've been looking at. One is just somebody that, I've liked their music for a little while. Machine Drum has a new album out. It's called A View of You. And there's a song on there called Believe in You that, like, sounds really cool. It's got a little bit of that, like, footwork sound mixed with the kind of stuff that Machine Drum usually has in his songs. So that's a really cool album. And I'm really intrigued by the resurgence of, like, 90s style grunge rock. Mm-hmm. My daughter was playing me a song off of, I don't know how you say the artist name, Biba Doobie. And it sounds like I was listening to Hole again or something. Like, it sounds like a Soundgarden song with a female singer. Like, it's and it's brand new, and it's like, okay, that's pretty cool. I'm into that.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm doing so much work on my computer that I've got all of my picks. Oh, before I say this, do you listen to BT at all?
BT, no. The artist.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I not in a while. I mean, but that's like one of the classic like trance people, right?
Sure. Yeah, he was my pick a few episodes ago.
Oh, nice.
His new record is awesome.
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
It's called The Lost Art of Longing.
And you mentioned iOS apps. Definitely Poolside.fm is my iOS app. It's just like a weird radio app that looks like something from the 80s, and it's just like Bizarro Land, and it has like all of these Easter eggs in it.
Oh, cool.
And it just plays like chill, like disco music all day.
That's awesome. I love that. So, speaking of chill music all day, I listen to a lot of instrumental, but I get down with some of this electronic, like trance stuff, like the BT. But there's like a whole bunch of do you know this group VULFPECK? Yeah. It seems like the people in that group put out an album a month. One member of that group puts out an album a month, and their stuff is listenable. Let me tell you, it's very listenable. The new VULFPECK album came out a week or two ago. It's The Joy of Music, The Job of Real Estate is the name of it. Very catchy, very funky. They the last track on the album they sold on eBay as album space. I think the band whose track ends this album paid like $70,000 on eBay for the last. I was expecting
awesome.
someone to just actually that it would be an ad at the end of the record, but no, it's actually like a band that sounds complimentary enough to their sound that it's pretty tasteful the way it closes the record.
That's pretty cool.
Pretty cool. But yeah, it's just like typical feel good funk music. There's like a nice funky version of Santa Baby on there.
Nice.
It's a fun ride if you're into that. Yeah, it's also like it's great like breathing warm up stuff for the band kids. It's how they come into every Google Meet is with VULFPECK.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Something like that.
Very cool.
It's good stuff. Oh, well, I don't want to hold you, but this has been so much fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll do it again in a shorter amount of time than 4 years, I think.
All right, man.
All right, it's
good
been
seeing you.
Yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
All right. I'll send you the audio too. See ya.
Okay, perfect. I'll see ya.
All right, bye.
Bye. I'm Robby Burns. Thanks for listening to Music Ed Tech Talk. You can find the show's page, show notes for the episode, and my blog at musicedtechtalk.com. You can subscribe to blog posts through an RSS app of your choice, and you can subscribe to the podcast in the podcast app of your choice. You can now get blog posts delivered right into your email inbox once a week. Please rate and review in the podcast app. It absolutely helps. It'll take a second and a few taps. Word of mouth is helpful too, so please spread the word. Learn more about my music and teaching career at robbyburns.com. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Robby Burns. Thanks to this episode's sponsor, Music First. Be sure to check them out. See you next time.